The first thing on the screen is snow. Not storybook snow, not postcard snow, just a blinding, overexposed smear of white that fills the whole frame. For a second, all you hear is harsh breathing inside a helmet and the crunch of boots, muffled by the mic. Then the camera jolts sideways and the world explodes. The white resolves into a narrow mountain pass, choked with drifts and half-buried rocks. Daylight glares off the slopes, so hard it hurts to look. Tracers rip in from somewhere above, orange lines carving angles into the air, ricochets sparking off vehicle armor. A truck in the middle of the convoy burns, black smoke punching up into that hard blue sky. "Get down! Get down!" Someone screams, the voice half swallowed by the thunder of a machine gun up on the ridge. The point of view lurches as the cameraman, some infantryman whose name we'll never know, dies behind a burning truck. Embers drift past like fireflies. Beyond the flickering wall of flames, more men are huddled behind another vehicle, rifles snapping up toward the cliffs, firing at nothing. There's no visible enemy, just flashes between rocks, muzzle sparks that vanish as soon as they appear. On the edge of the frame, a young lieutenant crawls into view, snow and soot smeared across his face. He's yelling into his radio, lips moving fast, but all we hear over the link is static and warped bursts of sound. Thunder 2-6. This is Pioneer. We are taking heavy. The rest is swallowed by a blast, so close the image turns into a blur of white and black. Mortar rounds walk down the pass with awful precision. One hits short, showering the camera with snow and fragments. The next slams into the road behind the last truck. Another lands ahead of the burning vehicle, boxing them in, until the pass is a stitched line of craters. Every explosion throws bodies down like rag dolls. Someone is screaming for a medic. Another voice, higher, closer, whispers right next to the mic. We're in their kill box. The helmet camera swings up. The sky is clear, unhelpful, like none of this is happening. The cliffs loom over the road, sheer and pocked with dark holes where the enemy guns flash. The lieutenant keeps trying the radio, switching frequencies, fingers shaking. Any station, this is Pioneer and White Pass, we are fixed, and... The reply is only a heavy hiss, then a wavering tone. Jamming. The kind that doesn't happen by accident. Snow around the burning truck stains slowly red where a wounded soldier lies half out of cover, arm twisted at a bad angle. No one can reach him. Every attempt draws a streak of tracers, so close they chew chips out of the steel. A mortar whistles in, closer than any so far. You can almost feel the blast coming. And then, cutting through everything, the roar of the guns, the shrieks, the mortars, comes a different sound. One single, clean rifle crack. Sharp, distant, precise. The incoming mortar round that should have landed in the center of the convoy splashes wide, detonating harmlessly against a rock outcrop. The next round falls long. The third doesn't land at all. Up on the ridge, just for a heartbeat, the camera catches a mortar spotter standing on a ledge, hand to his radio. He jerks, stumbles backward as a small red mist appears at his chest, and tumbles out of sight. Down in the pass, the soldiers don't know exactly what happened, only that the pattern is broken. The next burst from the enemy's heavy machine gun is wild and high, stitching snow well above the trucks. "Where did that come from?" someone shouts. Before anyone can answer, the lieutenant's second radio, one he'd all but forgotten, crackles to life. The signal is thin, barely cutting through the static, but it's there, a lifeline on a bad channel. "Convoy, this is Overwatch Sierra. Shift left. Truck 3, smoke now. Stay low, 10 seconds. The voice is female. Calm, not even out of breath. The lieutenant blinks, wipes soot from his eyes, and looks around as if expecting to see her standing right there. He grabs the handset. "Say again, Overwatch." "No time, Lieutenant." The voice is steady, each word trimmed short. "Smoke front of your position. Get everyone into the left side dish." 10 seconds before they adjust. He doesn't know who that is, but the pass is being methodically diced around him, and listening to command net hasn't helped at all. "Do it," he roars. Truck 3 pops smoke. Gray clouds billow out, mixing with the darker column rising from the burning vehicle. Through that murky curtain, The camera catches glimpses of shapes scrambling from behind cover and diving into the shallow ditch on the left side of the road, half buried in snow. Another single rifle shot echoes from somewhere high up on the ridge. One of the enemy machine guns that had been raking the ditch goes silent mid-burst, its last rounds tearing harmlessly into a snowbank. A second later, another shot. A second enemy position goes quiet. Who the hell is that? A soldier breathes. More shots now, but not a frantic rush. Each separated from the next by a measured pause. 1, 2, 3, each followed by something on the ridgeline falling still, or a sudden gap in the pattern of fire. The view swings wildly as the cameraman peeks above the edge of the ditch, trying to see. Above the blizzard of tracers and smoke, high on the right-hand cliff, there's a tiny, barely visible shape locked into the rocks. Just a dark smear against the snow. A figure prone on some impossible edge. The sun catches on a scope for half a heartbeat, throwing a brief starburst across the lens. Then another mortar round lands. The world jumps, and when the camera steadies, the tiny figure is gone, swallowed by snow glare and distance. The voice on the secondary net comes back, as crisp as before. You got a gap on your rear right. Move the wounded now, one team covering. You've got 30 seconds before they shift fire. Copy. The lieutenant looks stunned, but he moves. Copy. Go. Go. The footage freezes on a frame of soldiers hauling their wounded through knee-deep snow, faces screwed up against cold and fear, smoke curling around them. The image erodes into digital static, then dissolves. Now we're in a different room entirely. Fluorescent lights buzz overhead in a windowless debriefing theater. The air smells of coffee and exhaustion. A big screen at the front shows a paused feed. The same scene we just watched, frozen a second before the blast. Beneath the picture, a line of text labels the file and the engagement. Below that, a few facts in sterile font. Kia, WIA, asset status. And below those, one line highlighted in yellow that has drawn everyone's eyes. Enemy fighters neutralized. 129, attributed to one Allied sniper. A colonel sits in the front row with a stylus in hand, tapping a tablet. To his left, an intelligence officer flips through printouts of battle damage assessment photographs. A medical major watches with her arms folded, jaw tight. 129 confirmed? The colonel asks without looking away from the screen. Confirmed and cross-checked, the intel officer replies. Mostly high-value fighters, too. Spotters, machine gunners, team leaders. Whichever shooter this was, they knew what to prioritize. On the screen again, the image of the tiny silhouette on the ridgeline is zoomed and enhanced, but distance and glare turn the form into a grainy blur. Still, you can see the outline of a long rifle. The set of shoulders. The unmistakable shape of a single person holding an entire kill zone in their hands. The colonel scrolls to the next slide. It's a personnel record. Photo at the top. A compact woman with steady eyes. Hair cropped regulation short. Expression neutral. Sergeant Karen Novak. Service history, unit assignments, qualification badges, commendations. Commendations stacked down one side. Little citations for marksmanship, for overwatch, for lives saved. Next to them, a single line that doesn't quite fit. Reprimand. Failure to comply with immediate withdrawal orders during engagement, prior tour. The colonel taps that line thoughtfully. The unit started calling her something after this, the intel officer says quietly, informally. It's in some of the after-action interviews. He flips to a transcript. A shaken infantryman, describing the moment tracer streams veered off and started dying midair, like someone was bending them away. Said it felt like an angel on the ridge, watching over them. The intel officer looks up at the colonel. They call her the angel in the snow. There's a beat of silence in the debrief room, just the faint whir of a projector. Angel or not, the colonel says at last, one sniper doesn't neutralize 129 trained fighters by accident. I want to know how she got that angle. I want to know why the enemy was so ready for that convoy. And I want to know why the hell we ignored her twice before we listened. On the screen, the paused image of White Pass seems to breathe. Snow, smoke, craters, fire. Somewhere, just off frame, A woman lies on an impossible ledge, doing the math that lets other people see another sunrise. Rewind, the voiceover says, as if speaking directly to the viewer. Let's go back to the beginning of that day, before the first shot, before the name, before the legend. Back when she was just the quiet one in the corner of the briefing room, and everyone was sure she'd never make it over the mountains. The snowplows started before dawn. Their engines coughed and growled in the half-light as they pushed through the night's accumulation, yellow beacons sweeping lazy arcs over hardened snow. The forward base sat in a shallow bowl between white peaks, its perimeter walls rimmed with frost, antennas crusted with ice. Breath steamed in the air wherever soldiers moved, big white puffs in the floodlights. Kara stepped out of the barracks into air, so cold it stole her first breath. The sky above was deep blue-black, stars fading near the eastern horizon where the first hint of light showed. Some of the guys coming off night watch hunched their shoulders, collars turned up against the wind. She kept her hood down, letting the bite wake her up. Her rifle case hung from one shoulder, range bag from the other. Each step crunched, the sound oddly loud in the morning stillness. Inside the briefing tent, warmth hit her first, then the smell of canvas, coffee, and too many bodies. She nodded to a few familiar faces, most of whom didn't nod back. It wasn't hostility exactly, more the way people reacted to the quiet one who always sat in the back, taking notes no one asked her to take. On the far end of the tent, a captain tapped a pointer against a large map projected onto a portable screen. The map showed White Pass, a graceful S-curve cut into the mountain range, annotated with altitude, warning markers, and a neat red line showing the convoy's planned route. Simple movement, the captain was saying as she slipped into a fold-out chair along the wall. Daytime, good visibility. Primary objective is escort for the signals team and their server asset. Secondary is presence. Remind anyone watching that we own that road. Total time, base to site, for hours. The men and women packed into the tent shuffled, scratched notes. A few looked like they prefer another hour of sleep. Someone in the back whispered, "Milk run." Kara set the case across her knees and unclipped it. The lid opened and the world narrowed to metal and glass. Familiar edges. The long barrel. The stock stained a darker shade in the places her hands spent the most time. She ran her fingers over the action, checking it out of habit, even though she'd done the same last night. Optical mounts snug. Turrets where she'd left them. Windage dial reset. Every movement small, precise. "Captain," somebody called from the front. "Any recent activity reported in the pass?" "Harassing fire on drone flights," the captain said. "Mostly pot shots. Nothing more organized in the last 2 weeks. Insurgents are more active on the far side of the ridge. That's why we're moving the listening post up, get a better ear into their valley." He moved his pointer to a small icon just beyond the curve of the pass. "Signals team will deploy the new server here. Once it's online, it will start cataloging intercepts in real time. So keep that truck intact, folks." A ripple of amusement moved through the room. Someone muttered, "Wouldn't want to disappoint the nerds." Kara slid her hand down and picked up a stack of laminated cards from a side pocket, her handmade range cards. She'd spent nights in a map room building them from satellite imagery and terrain models, trying to get a feel for distances, angles, likely enemy positions. Across the aisle, 2 squad members from 1st Platoon leaned toward each other. "Hope they're not counting on Novak to keep up if we take fire," one said under his breath. "She's what, 5'2" on a good day?" the other whispered back. "In this altitude, she'll never make it over the pass if things go sideways. We'll be dragging her and the gun both." Kara pretended not to hear. She'd heard variations of that since she arrived. Too small, too quiet, too everything that didn't fit whatever image they had of a sniper in their heads. The projector flicked to another slide. Zoom in on White Pass. Here the red route line curled between contour lines packed so tightly they were almost black. Steep rock walls. Narrow ground. Known insurgent activity here and here, the captain said, tapping 2 areas beyond the pass. Road itself has been clear, aside from the harassment I mentioned. ROE is standard. You see a weapon pointed at you, you deal with it. As the rest of the room focused on the route line, Kara's eyes slid away, tracing the contour lines instead. She saw the way the slope rose above the road at a harsh angle, how the cliff faces formed natural balconies and shelves. She traced potential arcs of fire in her head, points where someone above could see the road without being easily seen in return. She pictured where she would go if she were planning an ambush up there. Not on the obvious rock outcroppings. Those would be watched. Somewhere less stable, where no one would expect a shooter. An avalanche chute, maybe. A narrow spur. No vac. The captain's voice cut through her thoughts. You tracking? She looked up. Yes, sir. You and your spotter will stage with second truck. Standard overwatch. No heroics. We're not expecting contact, but you know how this works. When we do, it tends to come all at once. Yes, sir, she repeated. When they were dismissed, chairs scraped. People stood stretching, tugging on gloves and tightening body armor. The tent emptied in noisy bursts. Kara took a second to stack her range cards, slid them into a pouch, and followed. Outside, the base was awake now. Trucks lined up near the motor pool, engines idling, white exhaust mixing with morning mist. Soldiers tossed rucks into beds, laughed about the cold, cursed the frostbite. Somewhere, a cook banged pots, breakfast smells mixing with diesel and gun oil. As she crossed the yard, her boots leaving crisp tracks in the crusted snow, something caught her eye on the ridge beyond the walls. Old boot prints, half filled with new snow, crossing a slope the patrol reports called unused. They weren't base footprints. The pattern was wrong. Too many side steps and stops, like whoever made them had moved slowly, carefully. Above them, scattered along the skyline, a series of rock piles sat just off natural lines. Not random scree, stacked. Markers. She stopped, squinted. The wind gusted, blowing a cloud of powder that made the marks blur. She pulled a small monocular from her pocket and looked again. Yep, rock cairns. Big enough to see from the road. Just small enough to ignore if you didn't know what you were looking at. Sergeant, a voice called. She lowered the glass. The young lieutenant who'd shouted for air earlier was striding toward her now, adjusting his chest rig. Fresh out of school, still carrying some of that academy straightness in his posture. Sir, she said, you're with second vehicle's overwatch, right? He asked. Appreciate you being out there. Hopefully you're bored all morning. You and me both, she said quietly. Then, before he could turn away, sir, about the pass. He frowned. What about it? She turned and pointed, tracing the line of the ridgeline markers with her finger. I saw footprints along that slope yesterday from the OP tower. Today they're mostly filled, but you can still see them. And those rocks, those are new. They're too regular to be natural. If someone wanted pre-registered aiming points for indirect fire on the road. She let the implication hang. The lieutenant followed her gesture, squinting. The sun was still low, light flat, making details harder to read. Could be old patrol markers, he said. Could be our guys. I checked last night, she answered. Last week's patrol route stayed lower. No reason to go up that high unless you're planning a shot at something. He blew out a breath, watching it plume. Intel's got no report of fortified positions up there. Intel's looking at drone flyovers, she said. Hard to see footprints on those. I'm not saying cancel. Just recommend we shift my overwatch off the road a bit. Get me up high, parallel to the pass. If somebody's waiting, it'd give us a chance to catch them setting up. He looked torn, glancing from the ridgeline back to the line of vehicles. The clock was ticking toward their step-off time. Protocol says you stay with the column, he said finally. If we start freelancing routes, things get messy. I can't have you dropping off the map out there. I won't drop off the map, sir. I'll shadow. 50 meters up, maybe 100. Good line of sight. If I'm wrong, we waste nothing. If I'm right. She didn't finish. The words hung between them. He ran a hand through his hair, fingers snagging on the edge of his cap. Look, we've had 5 quiet runs through that pass in the last month. I'm not ignoring you, but if I start rewriting the playbook every time someone has a bad feeling, command is going to ask why. She thought of the black line on her record. Failure to comply with immediate withdrawal orders. She'd had a bad feeling then, too. That time, she'd listened to it. Men were alive because of that. Paperwork hadn't cared. Understood, she said. His expression softened a fraction. We'll keep your concern in mind. But for now, standard route. Stick close to second truck. If we take fire, I need to know exactly where you are. Yes, sir. He clapped her shoulder, not unkindly, and moved off, yelling for everyone to mount up. At the motor pool, a pair of signals techs wrestled a heavy hardened case up the ramp into a specially armored truck. The case had multiple warning labels, tamper seals, and a small biolock panel. One of the techs grunted as they set it on its brackets. "Careful with my baby," he said to the driver. "If this thing gets dinged, I'm going back to paper logs and nightmares." "What's in it anyway?" the driver asked. "Looks like it could survive orbit re-entry." "Just boring server stuff," the tech said breezily. "Boxes and blinking lights. The magic that makes the brass happy when they see charts." He laughed it off, but Kara's gaze lingered on the case. The markings weren't just standard cryptographic gear warnings. There were additional stickers indicating compartmented intelligence. She filed it away with the footprints and the markers. Beside the truck, her assigned snowmobile idled, light plume of exhaust marking the cold. Her spotter, a lanky corporal with a perpetual grin, sat astride it, flipping through a pack of cards. "You ready for a scenic tour, Sarge?" he called. "I heard they're serving hot cocoa at the far side." "Save the jokes for after we're back," she said, climbing on behind him and strapping in her rifle. "I want eyes on those ridges." "Roger that. I'll drive, you brood." She keyed on her backup comms, small, low-power handsets, line of sight only. She cycled through frequencies, listening. Most were clear. On one, though, she caught a strange, warbling static like someone was slowly turning a dial past the right station. She frowned, adjusted the squelch. The interference didn't fit the usual environmental patterns up here. Too deliberate. "Problem?" her spotter asked. "Maybe nothing," she murmured. "Just noise." The ramp to the main gate rattled open. The first truck rolled out, chains clinking on frozen ground. The convoy snaked into formation, engines rumbling in sequence. Someone in the rear truck snapped a photo of the sunrise over the mountains, bright orange bleeding into pale blue. As the line began to move, spirits were high. Soldiers clung to the rails, joking, tossing small chunks of snow at each other. The nickname Milk Run bounced from one vehicle to the next. Even the captain seemed relaxed, standing in the lead truck's hatch, glancing back at the formation with a look that said he'd rather be anywhere warmer. Kara Spotter eased the snowmobile into motion alongside second truck. Wind knifed past them, the cold biting harder at higher speed. She lifted her binoculars and scanned the ridgeline ahead, tracing the line of rock markers she'd seen, now sliding into view as they approached. Most of the others weren't looking up at all. They watched the road ahead, or each other, or their phones. One or two took selfies with the white peaks in the background. Her chest felt tight, not from the cold. Something in the pattern bothered her. The markers, the interference, the server case. Little separate things that might mean nothing, but together. She checked her range cards again, flipping to the page for White Pass. Lines and scribbles she'd made now felt inadequate. The map never truly matched the ground. The closer they got, the quieter she felt inside. When they crested the last rise before the pass, the world opened in front of them. The road narrowed, hemmed in by rock walls dusted with fresh snow. Snowbanks piled higher than the trucks lined the edges, soft-looking but revealing glints of ice beneath. Above, the cliffs rose, dotted with dark patches of bare stone and scraggly trees clinging to impossible places. "It's pretty," her spotter said over the intercom. "In a we could all die here sort of way." "Eyes up," she said. "Tell me if you see anything that doesn't fit." "Besides us," he joked, then sobered at the look she gave him. Right. The convoy entered the pass. The air here had a different quality, sound bouncing between rock walls, every engine noise amplified. The sun, now higher, reflected off the snow in blinding sheets, forcing squints behind sunglasses. Kara leaned into the wind, scanning left and right. For a few minutes, everything was just snow and rock. No movement. Nothing. Then she saw it. A speck in the sky, just above the right-hand ridge, too fast and straight to be a bird, too small to be a helicopter. It glinted briefly in the sun before dropping behind the rock. Drone, she said immediately. 2 o'clock hot. Her spotter followed her gaze. I didn't see. The explosion at the front of the convoy cut him off. The lead truck vanished in a bloom of fire and snow, the shockwave slamming into the rest of the vehicles like a physical shove. The snowmobile lurched sideways. Kara grabbed the corporal's harness with one hand and the frame with the other as they skidded. "Brake!" she snapped. He slammed his boots down, carving the machine into a hard stop against a small snow berm just off the road. Up ahead, debris rained down, chunks of metal and rubber tumbling end over end. The truck's wreckage blocked the road completely. Flames licked hungrily at spilled fuel. For a heartbeat, there was stunned silence. Then the cliffs lit up. Machine guns on both sides opened, the sound like angry saws shredding the air. Bullets tore into metal, shattered glass, kicked up plumes of snow. RPGs hissed in, their trails streaking across the pass, punching into the side of a vehicle, detonating in orange flashes. Kara dove off the snowmobile into the nearest depression, dragging her rifle with her. The cold bit into her gloves as she pressed herself into the hollow. "Contact! Contact!" the lieutenant's voice screamed over the mainnet. "Ambush in the pass. Multiple." His words dissolved into a burst of static, then a wall of dense, unnatural noise that drowned out everything. The jamming hit like a curtain dropping. Kara grimaced and ripped her main radio earpiece off. She pulled her backup handset for her chest rig, keyed it. "Overwatch, this is Sierra." Only fragments came through. Shredded syllables. Shouts that cut in mid-word. Underneath it all, a faint murmur in another language, calm and clipped. Someone on the enemy side directing traffic. Mortars began to fall. The first landed short, a geyser of snow and rock. The second hit the road between trucks 4 and 5, flipping one of them onto its side. The third bracketed the rear of the column, filling the air with white dust and ringing ears. Kara looked down into the kill zone. She could see almost everything from her slightly elevated, offset position. Men sprawled in the open, some moving, some not. The wounded teammate she ran morning drills with, Corporal Vega, was down near the center, one leg bent wrong, trying and failing to crawl. Over the roar, she could hear someone closer, over the open air, a voice shaking. "We're in their kill box." She pressed the binoculars to her eyes, sweeping the high ground. There, on a ledge to the left, a figure with a radio, one hand up, watching the impacts. The mortar spotter. She followed the direction of his gaze and caught the outline of the tube itself on a secondary shelf. A tripod-mounted machine gun sat on the opposite side of the pass, its muzzle flashing in short, controlled bursts. Men moved between rock covers with practiced economy, not the reckless rush of amateurs. These weren't scattered insurgents taking potshots. This was a planned, rehearsed engagement. Her breath clouded the glass. She forced herself to breathe slower. Behind the wreck of the lead truck, she saw movement that made her stomach go cold. A small assault element, 6 fighters at least, moving low and fast along a shallow depression in the rock, using smoke in the terrain to keep themselves masked from the road. They weren't heading for the front. They weren't even shooting much. They were angling toward the second armored truck, the one with the hardened server case. So they knew. They knew exactly what truck mattered. She grabbed her backup radio again, keyed twice, the prearranged signal for emergency contact. "Command, this is Sierra," she said, hoping anyone was listening on the same dead-feeling channel. "Enemy has pre-registered the entire pass. Mortars, MGs, trained assault element moving on the server truck. They knew our route." Only static answered. Down below, another mortar landed close enough that she felt the concussion through the rock beneath her. Vega cried out, voice cut short as debris washed over him. Her orders in a situation like this were clear. If Overwatch was cut off, if communications broke down and the column became combat ineffective, sniper elements were to disengage and fall back to a rally point behind the contact. Preserve the asset. Live to fight another day. She knew the doctrine as well as anyone. The reprimand on her file was a reminder of what happened when she ignored it. She pressed her forehead briefly against the cold rock, eyes closed. Inhale, exhale. In her mind's eye, she saw the rally point, a safe fold in the terrain behind, out of the line of fire. Easy to reach if she turned the snowmobile around, hugged the low ground. Survival wrapped up in procedure. She opened her eyes again and looked down at the pass. Vega lay motionless now. The lieutenant was still trying to get his radio to work, his face pale, lips moving in what might be a prayer or a curse. The server truck's driver was pinned behind his door, the signals techs huddled in the shadow of their precious hardware, unarmed. The assault team was less than 50 meters from the truck's blind side. "Damn it," she whispered. Her gaze slid up to the cliffs opposite, tracing the line of rock, the snow chutes she'd memorized from the map. There was a narrow, ugly-looking chute leading up to an outcrop she dismissed at first. Too exposed, too steep, too unstable. From here, she could see something the satellite images hadn't captured. That outcrop jutted just enough to see across the top of the enemy positions, angled perfectly into the bowl of the pass. From there, a shooter could look straight down on the mortar spotter, the machine guns, even the jammer. She spotted the antenna now, a little tripod bristling with rods on a small shelf just behind the MG nest. No one would expect a friendly sniper to be there, because no one would expect anyone to be there. It was a place for avalanches and falling rocks, not for people. Her heart hammered against her ribs. The mortar's rate picked up. Someone in the enemy command structure wanted to finish this before reinforcements could be called, even if, right now, there was no line open to call with. Kara slung her rifle, cinched the strap tight. She looked back at her snowmobile, half buried where it had skidded to a stop. Her spotter huddled behind it, wide-eyed, weapon clutched tight. "What's the plan, Sarge?" he shouted over the noise. "You stay here," she said, crouching beside him for a second. "Keep your head down. If they push this far, you pull back toward the base. Don't be a hero." His throat bobbed. "Where are you going?" She looked up at the chute, at the needle of rock jutting into the sky. "Up," she said. "That thing? That's suicide." "Maybe two different kinds," she said. "Keep your hand set on this frequency. If I get a chance to open comms, you'll hear it." He grabbed her sleeve. "Doctrine says we bug out if." "We're past doctrine," she cut in, more sharply than she meant to. She softened her tone. "Right now, either someone gets above them, or everyone in that pass dies. I'm the only one positioned to try." He hesitated, then let go, fingers shaking. "Sergeant." "Novak." She managed a thin smile. "Don't worry. I'm slow at altitude, remember? I'll probably never make it." It was a bad joke, but it made his mouth twitch, tension cracking just enough. She turned away before he could see the flash of fear in her own eyes. The first steps into the chute were like stepping onto the roof of the world. The gradient hit her immediately, calves screaming as she kicked boots into unstable snow. The surface looked solid from a distance, but up close it was a mosaic of hollow pockets and glazed ice. Powder slid away under her weight in soft avalanches every time she put her foot down. Above, a mortar round detonated, sending a cascade of small rocks clattering down. They pinged off her helmet and shoulders. One fist-sized chunk bounced by, so close she felt the wind of it. She hugged the rock wall to her right, fingers seeking out imperfections to pull against. Her rifle rode tight across her back, balanced, but every movement threatened to throw her off center. From time to time, one of the enemy fighters sweeping the slope with a machine gun sent a burst at her general direction. The rounds hissed overhead, chewing grooves in the snow. They couldn't see her clearly. They were shooting shadows, but one lucky hit could start a slide that would carry her back down into the kill zone in pieces. She paused when she could, heart banging in her ears, listening to the timing of their bursts. When the mortars boomed, their own noise masked hers, so she moved then, 2 steps, 3, before freezing again, pressed into a shallow depression. Halfway up, her boot slipped on an invisible layer of ice beneath the powder. Her foot shot out. She slammed sideways into the rock wall, shoulder first. Her rifle, jerked by the strap, swung and smashed against the stone with a sickening crack. She snagged a protrusion with both hands and stopped herself from sliding. Snow sloughed away beneath her, tumbling down toward the pass. For a long second she hung there, breathing raggedly, cursing inside her head. When she wrestled herself back into some semblance of balance, she reached back with numb fingers, feeling for damage. Her gloved hand found shattered glass where the outer lens of her scope should have been smooth. "Of course," she muttered. Bits of glass tinkled into the snow as she gingerly brushed at them. The scope mount felt loose, too. The zero she'd carefully maintained now ? There was no going back down. Not now. She found a small, relatively flat spot carved into the chute where the rock made a shallow step and wedged herself in. Wind gusted, blowing icy beads into her face. With practiced motions slowed by the cold, she unstrapped the rifle, laid it across her lap, and dug out a small multi-tool. Her fingers didn't want to obey, clumsy in the cold, but she forced them. She stripped the scope off, ignoring how exposed she was. A machine gun burst walked across the face of the chute above, sending a fresh spray of snow down like powder glass. She hunched over the rifle, making herself small, body between the weapon and any stray impacts. Tiny shards of glass clung to the scope body. She shook them out, used a bit of cloth to wipe the remaining dust. The outer lens had taken a hit. The inner glass remained intact, but the alignment between optic and barrel was a mystery now. She remounted it as best she could, tightening the screws until her hands ached. There would be no time to re-zero on a comm range. Her adjustments would have to be gut and experience. By the time she finished, her fingertips burned with cold, even inside the gloves. She flexed them, shook her hands out, slung the rifle again, and continued the climb. As if the mountain sensed her resolve and decided to test it, the weather shifted. One moment, visibility stretched a kilometer down the pass. The next, a wall of gray rolled in from the far side of the valley, a sudden snow squall sweeping over the peaks. Flakes came sideways, stinging her face. The cliffs blurred, edges softening. Within minutes, the world she'd been fighting in became a gray-white haze. The pass below turned into a shadowed gouge filled with ghostly shapes and flashes of light. The enemy kept firing. Their arcs of tracer turned into faint streaks, almost beautiful in the muted air. Mortars still punched holes in the snow, but their smoke vanished quickly into the swirling curtain. Down in the kill zone, things deteriorated. Kara could see less, but what she saw was worse. One of the trucks now burned fully, flames licking the sky. The wounded who'd been stable before were now in more danger. Cold, shrapnel, suffocation under the weight of snow and debris. Vega lay still, his leg at a wrong angle, the white around him stained. The assault team had used the confusion to close even more distance, their outlines barely discernible through the squall as they crept toward the rear doors of the server truck. She pushed the last 20 meters like she was sprinting through water. At the top of the chute, the rock narrowed into a ledge barely wider than her shoulders. It was more cracked than path, a knife-edge balcony jutting out into space. She crawled onto it on her hands and knees, pressing herself against the mountain, the drop on the other side a white void. She did not look down. Once she was belly flat, she inched forward until her boots braced against a nub of stone and her chest lay across the rock lip. Wind howled past, trying to peel her away. From here, finally, she could see everything. The pass was a bowl beneath her, the road a scratched line, the convoy a string of black scars. The mortar position was clearly visible on a shelf below, and to her left, the machine gun nest on the opposite wall, the jammer antenna bracketed by sandbags. The assault team's route lay bare, their cover broken from this angle. Even the drone operator's hide, a small notch in the rock near the back, stood out in the way disturbed snow did. This was the angle no one had believed in, the view that existed only in her range cards and what-ifs. She wedged herself deeper into the rock, using a crack to anchor her elbow. She packed loose snow around the rifle's fore end, creating a makeshift brace against the wind. Her range cards were useless up here. The distances were all wrong from this vantage, the lines she'd drawn last week made obsolete by one climb. She closed her eyes for a second and ran the math in her head. Estimate the distance, subtract the drop, account for angle shooting downhill. She opened them again and found a mortar spotter in her scope. The crosshair was not where it would have been before. The impact with the rock had changed the zero, but in what direction? Only one way to find out. She drew in a breath, let half of it out. For a heartbeat, there was no wind, no mortars, no yelling. Just her and the tiny figure in the glass, arm up, mouth moving on a call that would land another round inside the convoy in seconds. She squeezed. The rifle bucked, the sound swallowed by the storm, but the crack cut through a gap in the noise. In the scope, the spotter jerked. His radio handset sprang from his hand. He crumpled backward, out of sight. Down below, the next mortar round landed wide, throwing snow harmlessly against a cliff. She exhaled slowly, a thread of white vapor trailing from her lips. The higher-ups would later ask how she'd gotten so many of them. They'd examine drone footage, simulate angles, note her target list, analyze her shot record. They would say it was skill, discipline, training. They'd miss the other piece, the moment when fear and function met on a ledge no one took, and she chose function. She glanced at her ammo count. Less than she wanted, enough if she made no mistakes. She flipped back to the jammer in her scope. The snow whirled around the antenna, the jammer operator a hunched shape beside it, headphones on, oblivious. If she wanted to give the people down there any chance of making a call, that had to be next. She shifted a fraction of an inch, compensating for the damaged optic. The crosshair sat a hair's breadth off where instinct told her the center was. She made a tiny mental adjustment. Then she went to work. Her first shot took the jammer operator in the chest. He folded, arms flying wide. A second round snapped into the small generator powering the array, shattering casing and fuel. For a heartbeat, the hillside blossomed in a brief spray of sparks. Then the tone in the lieutenant's radio suddenly changed, from flatlining static to something with depth. "This is Pioneer, White Pass grid," he half-sobbed into the handset, voice breaking through. Kara heard the first clear words over her own secondary net, the signal bleeding into the mountain air. She didn't answer. She couldn't. Any extra time on the radio was another chance for someone with more tech than guns to pin her down. Instead, she rolled her cheek back against the stock, found the glint of the enemy sniper's scope on the opposite ridge, and waited. The counter-sniper was good. He stayed low, moved between 3 different hides she could see. After each shot he took at the convoy, he disappeared, letting the echo mask his origin. She watched his pattern, remembering every location. The third time he fired, she didn't wait for the follow-up. She aimed at the spot she knew he'd slip into next. When his helmet edge broke the snow line, she was already pressing the trigger. He never got his next shot off. Down below, RPG teams tried to move toward the last intact vehicle. From her angle, their cover was an illusion. Each time they paused to lean into their launchers, they exposed shoulders, helmets, bits of gear. Each exposure was a chance. Shot. Adjust. Shot. Each bullet a decision. Who lives, who doesn't? Who gets another breath of frozen air? The enemy adapted faster than most, because they weren't dumb. After 4 Overwatch elements had gone quiet, and 3 RPG crews lay sprawled, a distant voice on their net must have changed the plan. She watched as bodies shifted along the far ridge, as a small team peeled off and began to climb toward her position, following the same chute she'd taken. A small quadcopter drone lifted from behind their lines, its rotors buzzing faintly above the roar of the fight. It climbed toward her ledge, zigzagging as its operator tried to fix her muzzle flash in the snowstorm. The margin for error shrank. She couldn't stay in one spot now. She couldn't let the drone mark her. Using the shallow width of the ledge, she wriggled laterally, moving only a meter or 2 at a time, creating micro-positions. Each time she settled, she fired only when the wind gusted hardest, letting the swirling snow hide the brief flash and smoke from her barrel. To anyone watching from below, the shots would seem to come from different points on the cliff or from nowhere at all. The drone buzzed closer, its camera panning. It paused over where she'd been 10 seconds earlier, hovering, relaying bad data to its operator. She was already 6 body lengths away, sighted in on its small, humming body. She timed the shot to a gust, the sound of her rifle lost in the storm. The bullet clipped one rotor. The drone lurched, spun, and spiraled away, vanishing into the fog between cliff and road. The enemy climbers in the chute came on anyway, faces upturned, weapons slung as they used hands and feet to drag themselves upward. From her steep angle, direct centermass shots risked overpenetration and misses. So she angled her shots off the rock, using ricochets, lead pinging off stone to strike from unexpected vectors. The first man took a round that shattered the rock next to his helmet. Fragments and deflected bullet tore through his visor. He toppled backward, arms flailing. His body slid down the chute, knocking another climber off balance. They tangled and tumbled, their panicked yells echoing in the pass. The survivors threw themselves flat, hugging the snow. They tried to return fire, but from their angle, all they could see was rock and swirling snow. She waited them out, forced them to waste rounds into nothing, then cut them down one by one when their desperation made them move. Below, the effect was obvious. The pressure from the ridges lessened. The outer ring of enemy fire faltered. The lieutenant, bleeding from a cut on his head, seized the window. Under Kara's unseen protection, he ordered a small fire team to bound to better cover, dragging the wounded and forming a tighter defensive perimeter around the server truck. They popped smoke and used gaps in the fire she'd created to move. The radio, now free of jamming, crackled with new voices. Higher command. Air assets checking in. Pioneer, this is Raptor flight, 2 minutes out. Mark your position. Copy, Raptor. Smoke on our position. The lieutenant's voice wobbled, but held. V advised enemy positions on both ridges coordinates. He rattled them off, but his line of sight was limited. From above, Kara could see pockets of fighters he couldn't, clusters forming for counterattacks, shadowed trenches beyond his view. She couldn't talk to the pilots, but she could show them. When she spotted a group of fighters massing behind a boulder field above the left ridge, prepping RPGs and adjusting bandoliers, she put 3 shots in rapid succession into the snow just in front of them, kicking up a weirdly regular pattern of white puffs. From the sky, the pilots saw those puffs like blinking markers. One of them keyed his mic Raptor 1, tally movement north of smoke. Engaging. Seconds later, the sound of jet engines rolled over the peaks. Bombs arced down, startlingly precise, turning that boulder field into a boiling cloud. She repeated the pattern. Find a cluster, fire a few rounds into the snow near them. The air crews, now attuned, began to recognize her signals. The enemy, realizing the tide was turning and that unseen eyes were coordinating with unseen hands, made a last, desperate play. A technical with a mounted heavy weapon, a captured civilian truck up-armored and jury-rigged in someone's workshop, roared into the pass from a side path. It skidded on the ice, tires fighting for purchase. The gunner braced between bursts, barrels slewing toward the huddled survivors. If it reached a clear line of sight, the remaining cover would become paper. Kara tracked it through her scope. The snow was coming down heavier now, flakes blurring the edges of the truck, but she could still see the glint of metal where the fuel line ran along the undercarriage and the dark, heavy box of ammunition packed near the gun mount. She had 3 rounds left in her magazine. She steadied her breathing, adjusted again for the damaged 0, accounted for the speed and the angle. There wasn't room for a miss. The truck hit a bump, wheels lifting slightly. In that weightless heartbeat, she fired. The round punched into the exposed section of fuel line, the bullet's energy sparking against metal. Fuel sprayed out behind the rear wheel, catching instantly on lingering heat from the exhaust. In the same instant, the secondary burn licked the ammo box. From the pass, it looked surreal. One moment the truck was skidding into place, the gunner screaming defiance, weapons swinging toward the convoy. The next, the rear of the vehicle blossomed into fire. A chain of rapid bangs followed as ammunition cooked off, spraying shrapnel in every direction. The gunner vanished in the bloom. The driver, if he lived at all, would have heard nothing over the roar before the cab itself became a fireball. The shock of that blast rippled through the enemy. Fighters who had been pressing forward hesitated. Some broke, sprinting back the way they'd come. Others froze, firing wild, no longer sure where to shoot. Above them, the jets made another pass, this one more punishing than the last. Ordnance slammed into fallback positions, trenches, and caves, turning carefully prepared strong points into smoking scars. Between bomb runs, Kara picked off any enemy who still had a clear shot of the convoy. An RPG gunner scrambling for cover, a machine gun crew trying to remount a weapon on a half-collapsed tripod, a squad leader waving his arms, trying in vain to restore order. Her rounds counted. Her tally rose, though she didn't track it. All she saw in that moment were tasks. This one first, then that one, until her magazine ran dry with a hollow click. By the time she lowered the rifle, the pass had changed. The guns on the ridges were mostly silent. Smoke drifted from multiple impact points. Here and there, sporadic shots still cracked, but they were isolated, panicked. Every time one sounded, someone below took cover, but more often than not, the shot hit nothing. The pinned squad down there began to realize that the relentless rain of fire had thinned, that there were now gaps where seconds ago there had been none. Medics moved among the wounded, dragging them to more solid cover. Someone threw a thumbs up at the lieutenant, who sagged for a second in exhausted relief. On an open channel, someone's voice came through, hoarse and half-laughing. "Whoever the hell is up there, don't move. We owe you everything." Kara lay with her cheek against the cold rock, breathing hard. Her shoulders trembled from more than just the cold. Her fingers felt distant from her, like they belonged to someone else. She glanced down at Vega. Medics had reached him, tourniquet cinched high on his leg, his face pale, but eyes open, head tilted back, gaze tracing the ridgeline like he could feel something there. She watched until they loaded him onto a stretcher and started the careful process of moving him toward the waiting helicopters, their rotor wash whipping up new swirls of snow. Only when the first bird lifted off, silhouetted against the darkening sky, did she let herself slide back from the edge of the ledge. The adrenaline drained away, leaving a hollow ache. She checked her ammo. Empty magazine well, spare pouches light. Her scope's cracked outer lens reflected a distorted fragment of the sky. Somewhere down there, someone was already starting the paperwork that would reduce what she'd just done into lines on a report. Up here, there was only the wind and the slow, steady return of silence. Days later, that silence carried into the debrief room. On the big screen, the colonel watched a slowed-down replay of one of her shots, the technicals end frame by frame. An intelligence officer pointed out the impact point, the subsequent fuel flash, the chain reaction. "Intentional?" the colonel asked. "No one hits that by luck," the intel officer said. She didn't go for the gunner or the driver. She hit the fuel, maybe even the ammo box. She knew what would happen. They moved through other clips, the mortar spotter dropping mid-call, the jammer going dark, the enemy sniper's hide going still, climbing bodies tumbling down the chute. Overlay diagrams showed before and after risk areas in the pass, where enemy fire had made movement impossible, then, seconds later, where windows opened just wide enough for the squad to run. On the table in front of them, the hardened server case sat open, its inner modules carefully extracted and plugged into a secure system. Lines of text scrolled across a secondary screen. Intercepted communications, partial keys. A signal's major tapped the screen. "This stuff," he said. "It's months of their operational chatter. Secure channels. With this, we can reconstruct cell structures, identify couriers. It's a gold mine." And they knew it, the colonel said. Captured documents from the battlefield, recovered from dead fighters and half-destroyed satchels, lay open on the table. Some had maps of White Pass annotated in neat handwriting, rock markers matching the cairns Kara had spotted. Others contained orders written in formal language, stressing the importance of target asset capture over simple disruption. The plan, as pieced together in the days after, was chilling in its clarity. The enemy force had not been a random militia band. It was a trained unit sent specifically to ambush that convoy, to seize the server intact and capture one of the signals officers. The goal was twofold: reclaim their own compromised data and stage a propaganda execution, broadcasting it globally to show the world and their supporters that they could strike back against the surveillance that had been choking them. Test our response time, the intel officer added. Score a diplomatic and information victory. If they pulled it off, we'd be dealing with a whole different kind of crisis right now. The colonel's gaze moved to the personnel record on his tablet again. The reprimand line glowed like a bruise among the decorations. He opened the file attached to it. The report from the previous tour described an incident in a different valley, another ambush. The order had been a fallback. Instead, Kara had left her assigned hide, crossed open ground under fire, and dragged 2 wounded men out of a kill zone. She'd saved them. She'd also disobeyed the letter of the withdrawal command. The officer writing the reprimand had not been on the ground. The investigator, a man with gray in his hair and a tired kindness in his eyes, sat across from Kara now, in a smaller room off the main theater. The walls here were bare. A recorder sat between them on the table. Kara wore a clean uniform, but her hands were still chapped and raw, the skin on her knuckles cracked from the cold. Her hair had grown out just enough to curl slightly against her collar. She stared down at the styrofoam cup of coffee in front of her as if it held answers. "You understand why I have to ask these questions?" the investigator said. "Yes, sir," she replied. "Protocol exists for a reason. We can't have every operator going rogue on a hunch. That's the argument I'm going to hear when this goes up the chain." She nodded once, accepting it without defense. "Walk me through the decision," he said. From the moment the first truck blew, she did. Her words were spare, but detailed. She spoke about the drone, the markers, the way the fire patterns confirmed pre-registration. She explained how she saw the assault element's route, the jammer, the mortar spotter, the machine gun nests. She laid out how the assault's focus on the server truck had told her what mattered to them. When she reached the part where orders would have told her to fall back, she paused. "Why didn't you?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. He wanted to hear it from her. "I had a line of sight," she said quietly. "No one else did. If I'd left, they wouldn't have made it. The truck, the wounded, maybe no one." "You weren't sure," he said. "You couldn't be." "I was sure enough to bet my life on it," she replied. "And theirs." He watched her for a moment. "This isn't the first time you've made that choice." She almost smiled. "Apparently I'm a slow learner, sir." He flipped his notes closed. "Or consistent." He took a breath, then another, as if choosing his words carefully. "Twice now," he said, "when protocol said pull back, you went the other way. Twice, you may have saved more lives than the procedure would have. That's the kind of thing the paperwork doesn't know how to handle." She had no answer for that. She wasn't looking for one. Outside the interview room, down the hall, the wounded from White Pass were recovering in the base's medical wing. One of them, Vega, balanced on crutches near a window, watching clouds snag on the peaks. His leg was wrapped tight, his future rewritten in a single blast.